Go Broncos. Yeah. I'm happy to be here at this conference. As Nancy said, this is a great conference. This is actually the first time I've put on my tie at this guy, and it's great. I mean, I'm at the reception with jeans on, and I see folks with shorts on. Great energy. Love it. Love it. Couple of things that's happening in Denver, and I'll keep my comments short because I know we want to get to the discussion. In the Denver metro area, the Regional Transportation District is providing service for 8-county area, a couple of million people. We have a project there called the Fast Tracks Project, very, very ambitious investment that we went to the voters with in 2004 for 0.4 of a cent to build out this investment. And what we're talking about is a balanced transportation system. I saw the manager of the bike share program in Denver. She's here. Perry Barnum is somewhere here. And we don't want to forget about that when you talk about providing transportation for the last mile, if you will. And so this balanced transportation system called Fast Tracks, we went to the voters. We were successful in 2004 to build, at that time, this $4.7 billion program. Of course, that program is something like $7.8 billion now. And so this idea of local investment is very real. This local investment with that sales tax increase coupled with some assistance from the federal government and also some assistance from the private sector. This, what I call a three-legged financing stool, is how I believe we will build transportation infrastructure in this country from here on out. You're not going to be able to get all of the money you need from any one of those sources. I believe it's going to be a combination of all three. One of the things that I required my senior team to do when I took over as general manager was read a book called Bold Endeavors. You may have heard of it. It talks about 10 infrastructure projects, 10 or 12 infrastructure projects in this country that were built through help by the federal government, private companies, the great infrastructure projects of our country, the interstate highway system, the Hoover Dam, the railroad system across this country. And each one of those infrastructure projects had critics. And I was quizzing one of my senior people saying, have you ever heard of Fisher Ames? And he was like, no, Phil, I've never heard of Fisher Ames. Well, Fisher Ames was the critic that advised against the Louisiana Purchase. And so these people will be lost to history. They will be lost to history as we rebuild this country's, build and rebuild this country's infrastructure, much like the European plan or the Marshall Plan. So with the Fast Tracks project, very, very aggressive plan, 122 miles of commuter rail, light rail, 18 miles of bus rapid transit, 21,000 miles of additional parking spaces, 52 new stations in and around our areas. And so we are on the path of building this great system. We've had our challenges. We made assumptions back in 2004 on how much sales tax we would collect. That has decreased, if you will, but we are still building. Of that 122 miles of rail and 18 miles of bus rapid transit, we have about 81 miles either under contract or under construction right now. We're opening up the first Fast Tracks line, light rail line, in April of next year, 8 months ahead of schedule. We're opening up a Denver Union Station, which will be the hub of our system in 2014. That will open 5 months ahead of schedule. We are moving forward with transit-oriented communities, asking our developers to provide affordable housing in and around our stations. We're embarking on the public-private partnership that Deputy Administrator Therese talked about, the Eagle Project, a $2.3 billion program, a very complex procurement that is a design, build, finance, operate, and maintain. In doing that, we understood the complexity of this procurement, did it in such a way and have a lot of lessons learned. We did a document on our website, but did it in such a way and so successful that it came in $305 million below budget. We're moving forward in making the Denver region one of the great cities in this country and the world, and we're doing it through transportation. The last point I'll make is the economic development piece. Therese mentioned our workforce program. One of the big pieces that go with this infrastructure build-out is extending the economic benefit to people whose community you're going through with the infrastructure project. We are building through communities of color, lower socioeconomic communities, and many times they are not able to get a job in the project that is going through their community. And so this Workforce Initiative Now, or WIN program, is designed to identify, assess, train, and put people to work in the communities where we're building the infrastructure project. It is very successful, as evident by the nearly 100 people in the program. We are tracking the zip codes where this program is being implemented. What happens in those communities? Does the crime rate go down? Does the foreclosure rate go down? Does the educational level go up? And so we're doing all these things through transportation infrastructure. I'll stop there and look forward to the discussion.
So are we mic'd for the, okay, great. I think we'll take the conversation from here in terms of some questions. I know I'm eager to share them. I've got 3 questions I'll be asking, kind of 2 of you each to answer to keep things moving along, and then I've crafted some specific ones for you based on your presentation, so it should be a good time. Let me start with Denny and Phil on this whole notion of voter initiatives for funding. A number of the new funding sources that are available now are in fact going to a vote, which brings a whole level of uncertainty in terms of outcome into the process. What have been some of the unique challenges that you both saw in putting a voter initiative on the ballot for transit, and how did you work to successfully ensure the yes outcome you wanted? Denny, let's start with you.
Well, I think in California there is a bizarre and peculiar challenge in that we have to win 2/3 vote. It's not enough to win a majority vote. And that dictate really transforms your planning for such ballot measures. In the first instance, it really means that you have to think system-wide and county-wide. This is not a measure that, for example, if we'd have put a subway project before voters expecting 2/3, we would never have won that county-wide. We have to have a whole complement of projects. And that, I think, compels a kind of negotiation in the community that is quite healthy. Nevertheless, the 2/3 vote, nevertheless, is still a challenge. It also, I think, dictates things about you know, your timing and what have you. You really need to think presidential election years, and you need to really treat presidential election years as unique opportunities, because those are the period of time when the turnout will be highest and the prospect of winning 2/3 will be possible. in Los Angeles, we are so vast, as you can tell, and not only in sheer numbers, but in in our geography, that many forms of grassroots organizing are no longer nearly so relevant in that kind of environment, because the number of people that you touch with those forums really begins to be de minimis, and so it really forces a commitment to major media, which really forces a high level of fundraising capability and the employment of very skilled professionals and so on. The grassroots part, which certainly is very relevant, is in the creation of the coalition itself, because without the broad-based coalition, you can't get the kind of credibility you need in order for elected officials to take the risk to lead. It is a risk to lead, especially if something needs a 2/3 vote, and that's really where your coalition building becomes crucial.
What about that risk to lead? What was that like in Denver and some of the other observations you had to manage, Phil?
Sure. Well, I think a couple of things. The region went out for a vote in 1997 that failed. And right after that failed vote, the region began to prepare for the next vote, which was 2004. There were various reasons why the 1997 vote failed. Lack of specificity in the plan, a number of different things. In 2004, we were successful, and a couple of things that since then that I realize is one, a lot of times the people don't know how much you're asking for. Okay, I mean, we say 4/10 of a cent. People don't know what that is. And so we start going out and telling people, listen, this is 4/10 on most $10 purchases to build out what I described earlier, 122 miles of rail and all those things. So I think this education piece and the campaign, like the one Denny is running and others around the country, educating the public. And so, and then the other piece of this is, in that education, is explaining to folks that you have to make some assumptions. I mean, with the Fast Tracks plan, there's revenue assumptions that we had to make. And, we're looking out over a 30-year period trying to make revenue assumptions. How much money in sales tax will you collect over 30 years? This ain't easy, right? And so a lot of the cities and counties, their idea of long range revenue assumptions is maybe 5 years. We're looking out over 30 years with these mega projects. And you know what? You're going to run into some down periods, which we saw in 2007, 2008, and 2009, where those revenue assumptions change. And so I think all of those things, the education piece, when you talk about campaigns and raising local money is very key, plus having a champion to help with that. And that was the then Denver mayor, who is now the Colorado governor, was the face of that, probably much like the LA mayor is here.
Right. Okay, we'll definitely talk about champions again, because I think that is really critical to success in any kind of endeavor. But I want to turn this now to economic development and how economic development gets woven into a transportation project. And Nancy, I want to start with you. I think we're probably in this room sort of beyond the notion that build it and they will come. Because then the question is, who's coming, when are they going to get here, and what's at the end? So my question is, how do you make economic development really a deliberate part of the planning and delivery, as opposed to the market sources that sort of whip you around on its own? How does that work?
Whip you around, or might tend to segregate benefits in one place and leave them out of another place. And I think that question actually drives us to this notion of mixed income, mixed communities, diverse communities, stability. And in order to achieve that, it's absolutely essential that we think through a variety of sectors, as I was saying at the podium, including housing into the agenda. I mean, if you build a transit system and you wait for the housing to naturally come there, but you don't make it, you don't affirmatively try to make that housing include affordability so that the community at the end of the day is a mixed community, then you wind up with the benefits of whatever that economic engine is being limited to a very few people. If you don't include essential services that make life easier for people or more convenient for people, you lose the opportunity for those kinds of economic benefits to translate to people beyond who would naturally be there. So I think it really is a part of this, this notion of holistic development. The other side of it is something that's being developed, the ideas of it are being developed around in the community development sector now, which is the idea of anchor institutions. Bringing in anchor institutions, finding ways of connecting with major hospitals, universities, other primary institutions that are not only service providers, but very important entry job providers. And doing that in a very intentional way that creates job and family income growth ladders for people, I think begins to pull these pieces together. Far better than just simply letting the market take its course and ending up with highly segregated communities.
Phil, I'd like you to follow on with Nancy's observation in this way. I've had the opportunity to visit Denver a few times in my role here as the FTA Deputy Administrator, which is one of the perks of the job, is seeing parts of the country that perhaps you hadn't had a chance to see before. But my question here is, you know, Denver, the central business district, the central part of Denver has undergone just incredible growth and development. But you still in your region have very classic sort of suburban areas. How do you tackle this broad economic development question when you have these very different types of communities and a regional economy is in play? What is some of the things that you dealt with there?
Thank you for the question. You know, economic development in my mind is in the eye of the beholder, right? I mean, economic development for a developer who wants to put a hotel near our station is one thing. Economic development for the kid that's walking down the street in the hood, economic development for that person is a job. And so we're talking about, it's in the eye of the beholder. And so a couple of things that, that we're trying to develop is to not just be the T in TOD, the T being transit. We're dealing, you know, as I see it, there is a clash, I think, between the traditional transit mindset that says, you know what, Phil, just put a surface lot out there with 500 spaces. That's all we want, Phil. Surface lot, 500 spaces. It's not our business to worry about the development of that. No, it is our business. And we are going to think, and we are thinking about how we can make that station more vibrant in terms of economic development. But in addition to putting that hotel or that retail near that station in the suburban area or the core, I want to talk to that developer about giving that kid that lives in that area a job to build that development that you're talking about that makes you rich in terms of development. And so I think this economic development idea can extend to the big developer and the young guy or lady that is living in that community that just needs a job to provide for their family.
Danny, you're Danny, and then we'll get back to
I think there are two dimensions to this question. One is the sort of broad regional economic development. You know, the Measure R program is envisioned to create more than 400,000 jobs about half of them in the construction process, in the build-out of its highway and transit system. Several hundred thousand jobs more in operations and in local government activities. So it's a major generator of economic activity in its own right. And the efficiency that it creates in the transportation system is an enormous injection of competitive advantage into the larger economy. So that's part of the equation. And project labor agreements and things of that sort, which Metro has adopted after negotiations with the Building Trades Council, are a very important part of ensuring that that happens in a fair, equitable, and broadly shared way. The other, and I think the one you're referring to, has to do with the economic development around station areas. And I think the principles there are not so different than economic revival or downtown revitalization in communities as a whole. You definitely, I mean, economies are like collaborative activity. And so getting people to come together in a collaborative way creates the opportunity for an economy. And you can do that, for example, we did it on the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica with movie theaters and outdoor dining and what have you. That brings people there. How do you get people to gather and share their wealth and share their energy and activity? And transit does the same. It injects an energy activity level into an area. And the question becomes, how do we optimize that? How do we take full advantage of that? And how do we ensure that it's equitable when it happens? And part of it certainly is ease of access. So when we think bicycle, pedestrian, and shuttle investments and things, sometimes we think health, and that's important and good, but we should also think about how we're enabling the system to be more efficient and bringing people together into that collaborative activity around the station area. That's, and then having the kind of nearby residential uses or job uses so that people's access is easier. I mean, access is about saving time and saving money and saving energy. And that's an efficiency, and an economy is all about efficiency, and transit injects efficiency.
Nancy.
Yeah, I asked Therese before we did this if it was okay to kind of jump in into the conversation, and she said that was fine. And I just wanted to, in a way, echo or support what both of my colleagues on the panel have said. And this panel, in a way, is kind of a microcosm of what this new reality can be, because reaching out to organizations that are really the community-based organizations like my organization, creating partnerships across the table, finding ways of keeping us together and relying on and leveraging our different expertises, I think is really the key that's going to unlock this notion of economic opportunity.
So I'm going to jump on that, though, because I think it's, just because it's a great point, but I think it points out the challenge of my next question, which is, as much as we have tried at all levels to be able to advance project delivery, these big projects take a long time. So when you're pulling all these coalitions together, how do you keep them together? Particularly when the faces around the table over that long period of time, from planning and conceiving a project to literally opening it and having people use it, which can, 5, 8, 10 years, sometimes more. How do you keep that commitment to delivering the project going, particularly with the new partnerships, Nancy, that you're bringing out here, where maybe their way of doing business tends to work on a slightly faster turnaround? Sure.
I mean, I'll jump in on that.
Yeah, and then I want all of y'all to,
sure.
to
I mean, I think, I was saying as I spoke, I think one of the most important things is money. If there is an alignment of resources that is bent on that goal of creating diversity, of creating many pieces that make communities work, that make transit work very well, that resource, that scarce resource, will be the thing that will keep people at the table and allow us to really execute the shared vision, even if the faces change along the way.
Yes, it's a real concern. These big projects take a long time. you know, you go through your environmental processes and you go through NEPA and all those kinds of things. It takes a while. You know, you better engage your PI team, first of all. I mean, I have all kind of events. I want a groundbreaking, I want a 35% completion event, I want a 50% completion event, I want a 75% completion event, and then the grand opening. I mean, and so I joke about that, but we have had those. And so it's an education opportunity to tell the community what you're doing and where you are in the process. When we did the Eagle P3, the public-private partnership, I called the contractor in who won the job, and the first thing I said to him was, or the project director, is, listen, anybody can build a bridge. You know, anybody can build, you know, put track out there. What you do in terms of impacting the community is what's important here. And so engaging the community and letting the community know where you are, and that is both the agency's responsibility and the contractor's responsibility, safety, all those things. So I think it's a constant educational piece, telling people where you are with the project, and you really do have to engage your public information folks and your public outreach folks to keep that word out.
Danny?
I think I would contribute to I agree with both of those characterizations. Certainly, a funding stream is a crucial part of keeping things. But I also think that early on, and this is really, when the kind of leadership that has convened to make these projects successful, make that possible, at that moment it is really an obligation of that leadership to ensure that the program going forward envisions and is committed to a shared prosperity, that it's not an afterthought, that later on, oh, by the way, out of conflict comes some subsequent commitment. That's the kind of dynamic that will yield the kind of chaotic dissipation of effort, energy, and commitment. You need to have an early commitment to shared prosperity. And I think primarily, at least in my view with respect to transit, that means making sure that there are protections against loss of affordable housing and displacement in your program, or at least relocation opportunities in the same general community, and that you're committed to providing the kind of affordable housing that will bring in a broad array, low income as well as middle income folks, so that the community that is being created is a genuine community, and a community that is built in a collaborative atmosphere built on the basis of this shared prosperity.
And Teresa, I wanted to say also that one of the things, as I heard you talking this morning, that I was so excited by is what the energy and the dynamism that's happening at the federal level. There has been a huge effort at the federal level to begin breaking down silos, to begin thinking about how do we braid these revenue streams together in such a manner that they really do create a much more holistic and comprehensive way of delivering benefit to our citizens. I think that kind of leadership and doing that kind of flexible funding and looking for ways of breaking the walls down is very important. I mentioned the book that the Low Income Investment Fund and the Federal Reserve have just published on what works in America's communities. In that book, we have a chapter that was written by 3 cabinet secretaries, Secretary Sebelius, Secretary Donovan, and Secretary Duncan. And I now wish that we had honestly gotten transportation into that, although with 3 secretaries, we had our plate full. You know, the main message of that chapter really is this notion of how do we align resources toward a goal that's bigger than any single revenue stream. And I think that's part of the answer.
Well, we're getting near time, I believe. So I want to ask each of you to leave us with your thoughts on, based on your experience and where you are, the projects you're involved with right now, TOA in this case, Move LA, and the transportation program Fast Tracks. what does it look like a decade from now? What do the communities around your, built around these visions, 10 years from now, what do they look like in your perspective?
Me first?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So there would be many cities and many towns across the country in my 10-year vision that would have transit at their core, so that residents had easy access to get to their jobs and to get to places where economic vibrancy is occurring. These would be mixed income communities that are diverse and therefore stable. They would have a wide range of services available to families, all the way from high quality schools to health services to early learning services for young kids, affordable housing. People would be walking rather than getting into a car and driving. And we would have achieved the idea of healthy, integrated, comprehensive community building.
Danny.
Well, I think in 10 years, the system has been built out, and people all over Los Angeles are riding the rainbow. And
singing the song.
And singing the song. And it is transformative for us because we have choices. We will still, of course, have a very widespread and heavily used automobile and highway system, but we will have choices. And the choices will not only include transit, they'll include bicycle access throughout the region, as well as good pedestrian access to our transit and to services. We'll have communities that are more prosperous because the efficiency that's created by this injection of access will make us a more competitive community in a global economy. You know, Los Angeles we're kind of in the middle between the Asian economy, the Latin American economy, which is booming, and the Atlantic European economy. When I was a college student, my classmate in Los Angeles, my classmates after graduation would say, well, I got to get out of LA. I'm going to go to the Bay Area. And I would go, why? It's, well, you know, the culture is better, the transportation is better, it's not so congested or what have you. Well, in 10 years from now, people in the Bay Area will be coming to Los Angeles. Because they will say, well, you know, the culture is better, the economy is better, the transportation is better, and they got the weather.
And from the Mile High.
Well, 10 years from now, Denver is going to be the #1 city in the West.
And the Broncos are going to win.
Yeah, Broncos going to win a couple of Super Bowls. No, I really believe that. I think through transportation investment, that the Denver region is going to be the best city in the West. You're looking at low unemployment because of the transportation infrastructure creating all of these jobs. I envision a state of good repair on our existing systems because we build all these things. We better figure out how to take care of them, just like your car, preventive maintenance and all of those things. I see a higher regional GDP because people will have jobs and they're spending more money on sales tax. I see an incredibly balanced transportation system. Air, we're talking an airport city, Aerotropolis in Denver. I see this balanced system with bus rapid transit, rail and bikes and walkable areas. I see high ridership. I see decreased dependence on foreign oil because of this balanced transportation system that we have. So I see, and of course, the completion of the entire Fast Tracks program.
Well, from my end, and reflecting on just the amazing insights from our panelists here today, whatever it brings in 10 years, what I'm hoping for is that it's the product of an inclusive and civil dialogue that outlines real choices from which we can make decisive action. And for, you know, that kind of outcome, requires the energy and the spirit and the commitments demonstrated by our partners and speakers here today. So let's give it up for them and have a good morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nicely done.